question one says, how has the author portrayed the protagonist from the point of view of the reporter? Now, when it comes to narrative text like this, it's always good to have a bit of a summary. Always it's good to like write a little like sentence about what you think this extract is about. I always recommend all my students to just make sure they comprehend what's going on by writing down a little summary. So here we can write down. Let's see if this works. Dealing a Gatsby got his name and reputation. Yeah. So that's just an easy, quick summary. And then we can go into the questions knowing a bit about this extract now. So first question, the point of view of the reporter, right? So it mentions the reporter at the very start about how this reporter kind of asks about what Jay Gatsby is to other people. If you go to where it says it occurred after a confused 5 minutes, where the man had heard Gatsby's name around the office, right? So that's the first mention of Gatsby's name around the office, and it kind of leads us to go down to the next bit, which it says Gatsby's ill reputation, right? So no, Gatsby kind of has not the best reputation around the office, right? We know the young reporter was trying to find what is Jay Gatsby to all these people, and then in the third paragraph it says Jay Gatsby had an ill reputation. So obviously, a couple things with the questions and the answers. It's good to know vocabulary. And as you go through all the questions, all the options, it's good to note down any definitions that you wouldn't know. So modest towards his own wealth, modest being like very humble, kind of accepting. Doesn't really seem like Gatsby is portrayed in that way. It's more so an ill reputation or bad reputation. If you go to B, it's a mysterious due to his widespread poor reputation. Right now, that seems to be the best option because of the thing that we came to in the third paragraph. C, temperamental towards the rumors spread by others. Temperamental being like kind of very like changing all the time, right? He is very affected by the rumors. Right now, we don't really know how Jay Gatsby feels about all this. All we know is that he has a bad reputation, and that's it. And if you go to D, it says reserved and not willing to address rumors. Again, we don't really know how he's been betrayed. We don't really know how he reacts to this. Reserved meaning like quite to himself, shy and quiet. But right now, from the information we have in the third paragraph, we know Jay Gatsby has quite an ill reputation. So we can say one is going to be B. We can go to question 2 now. Question 2. What was the protagonist's real name and why did you reject it? Right. So again, with narratives, you can always usually find the answers in the extract. If not, you can kind of infer it by just reading between the lines and trying to comprehend from the summary we had before. Here, if you go to the fourth paragraph, it says James Gatz is really, or at least legally, his name, right? He mentions James Gatz, right? And a bit after that, it says he had changed it at the age of 17. So we know his real name is actually James Gatz, right? So we know it either has to be between A or D. So we narrowed it down to 50-50, but we need to figure out what the reason was for that, right? The first one says people disliked him based on his family history. And the second one says he himself disliked the identity that was born with, right? So if you keep reading in paragraph 4, it says Jay Gatsby did all these activities with Dan Cody's yacht, and so on and so forth. We don't really get too much about the backstory to his name, so we'll go to the next paragraph after that, right? And now he mentions that his parents were unsuccessful farm people, right? And his imagination had never really accepted them as his parents at all, right? So that's the key part for question 2. He himself, right, didn't really like the family history that he had, and he didn't like the identity that he was born with, right? So you might be led to believe it could be A because it mentions, oh, his parents were unsuccessful farm people, but if you keep reading on, it's actually he himself who didn't like his family history. So we're going to say 2 is going to be D. Now, 3. Why has the author described the protagonist's past? Now, first of all, when we go to a question like this, we need to figure out what the protagonist's past was mentioned. If we go to the last bit of paragraph, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It says, he invented this J. Gatsby that a 17-year-old boy would likely to invent, and to this conception, he was faithful to the end. Right? So, he kind of made the name, right? Because he himself wanted to reinvent himself, essentially, right? He didn't like the past he was born with, because we know in question 2, he didn't like the family history or his identity. So, in doing this, by making a new name, he kind of reinvented himself, right? And we know he reinvented himself because he had aspirations to kind of better himself and work at a better future, right? So this is a key part of question 3 because he wanted to kind of reimagine who he could be and kind of live in this fantasy to fulfill his own aspirations. So if you go back to question 3, we can kind of understand that the answer is going to be A. He had aspirations to be greater than the identity that was born into, and that is why the protagonist past to kind of explain, as well as the backstory to his name. Now, question 4. It says the word beating means to be traveling, but what does it also imply about the protagonist's life, right? So let's go to where it mentions beating here, right? The very last paragraph, it says, for over a year, he had been beating his way along the south shore of Lake Superior as a clam digger and a salmon fisher, right? So we know beating in the sense, right? He is working all these manual labor jobs like a clam digger, salmon fisher, anything that brought him food and bed, right? He's kind of making ends. He's kind of on his last legs, trying to do anything to kind of get through the day, right? Now, if you go back to the answer options, it says he moved rapidly across the area in a matter of days. Now, obviously, if he was doing a lot of manual labor and kind of beating himself down, we don't really get the impression that he was moving fast, right? And if you go to B, it says he remained in a small area over the year. Again, we don't really get that sense when he does all his manual labor to make by and make do on whatever he has. So we can kind of say it's not going to be there. C, he travels slowly and with great difficulty, right? Now, this seems to be a pretty good answer option, right? Because we know he is kind of struggling with all the manual labor that he has to endure. And we can kind of assume that this is going to be the answer, right? And D, it says he was involved in activities to do with the sea. He was with the clam digger and the salmon fishing, but beating kind of doesn't imply that, right? Beating seems like he's getting beat down as he trudges along, and he's kind of just like taking a beating from life in general, right? So we can kind of assume 4 is going to be C because he's traveling quite slowly and with great difficulty. He doesn't really want to get through the day, but he has to since he has to survive. So we can say 4 is C there. Now, 5. It says, what does the phrase, his brown, hardening body, reveal about the protagonist's past? Now, let's figure out where is his brown, hardening body. Again, like the previous question, it is in the last extract, the last paragraph, sorry. It says, his brown, hardening body lived naturally through the half fierce, half lazy work of the bracing days, right? So he kind of had a very, very difficult day. Obviously, we know he was doing manual labor with clam digging, salmon fishing, and he was getting beat down just by the daily happenings of his life, right? Now, when it says brown and hardening, right? Hardening body, we can kind of assume is talking about how he's getting more muscular, right? And when it says his brown hardened body, we can kind of assume he's getting a bit tanned, right? Obviously, if you're doing a lot of manual labor in the sun, you're going to get a bit sunburned, right? You're going to get a bit tan. So that's what the brown hardening body is kind of doing. It's kind of painting a picture using very descriptive language to make sure the audience understands that he's going through like a lot of difficulty just to make do, right? He is a very determined person, and he's trying to do anything so he can get some money, right? He lived through half fierce, half lazy work of the basic days, right? So it's very, very difficult for Jay Gatsby. So if you go back to answer options, we know the harding refers to muscular, the brown refers to tan, and the only one kind of referring to either one of those is going to be B. Well, it says he was gaining muscle, right, by working hard, which makes sense because he had manual labor jobs, right? And that is why we're going to choose B as our answer option for 5. Now, if you go to 6, it says, which of the following is most implied by the passage? Now, if you go through all the answer options, when it comes to these kind of ones, we can't really figure out the option by just finding a part in the narrative, right? We kind of just get a sense of what's going on in the passage and come to a conclusion by ourselves by reading through all the answer options. So let's do that here. The reporter believed all the rumors surrounding the protagonist, right? So if you go back to the reporter section, the reporter kind of just says, there's contemporary rumors, and there were like so many different things, right? But he doesn't really give any input about these rumors, right? He just says, oh, the rumors are there, but he's not giving an opinion about it, right? So we can't really come to a conclusion saying, oh, the reporter believed everything, right? Now, B, the protagonist's parents had disapproved of his name change. Again, if you go back to where it mentions his name change, he says he changed his name because of the parents, but it doesn't really mention how his parents reacted to that, right? So again, we can't really assume that his parents disapproved of it because there's no information given to us in the text. C, the protagonist's father had become successful due to the protagonist's help. Again, if you go back, it says, if it means anything, right, there must be about his father's business, right? Now here, it doesn't really mention that he himself improved the father's business. It just kind of mentioned the father's business. And because it just explicitly mentions it, doesn't really mean you can say, oh, Jay Gatsby helped the father's business, right? So we're not going to come to the conclusion that C is our answer option either. And if you go to D, the protagonist had become accomplished and successful later in life, right? Now, if you really take a look at this, the first bit of this extract, right, is set in the current time, right? And this little bit at the end is kind of mentioning the backstory of Jay Gatsby, right? This is the current happenings. And a little bit at the end is how he came about to that, right? So we know Jay Gatsby has an ill reputation, right? But he's still quite famous. For what reason? We know he is quite a successful businessman of some sort, right? We don't know what he does really. But if you look at what it says in the first couple paragraphs, it says there are contemporary rumors, right? There's talking about people in New York, right? There's talking about reporters, right? There are talking about inventions, right? And there were talks about one more thing. Oh, Jay Gatsby's name around his office, right? So we know he is some kind of famous businessman of some sort, right? Selling inventions. He has modern rumors about his bad reputation. So we can kind of tell, we can kind of get a sense that he is quite successful now, right? And at the very end, we know how he came to be that successful, right? He had a very good work ethic. He was determined. He came from nothing and he kind of worked his way up to get to the point that he is at in this current day. Yeah. So we can kind of come to the conclusion then that 6 will be D, because the protagonist had become accomplished and successful later in life, right? At the very start of his life, he was born into a family of farmers who were very unsuccessful. And because of this, he changed his name and tried to make better, right? He changed his name to kind of reinvent himself, which he kind of did, right? He tried to get all these manual labor jobs, and then he worked his way up the kind of ladder to get to the point that he is now, by being a successful businessman. But if you keep reading The Great Gatsby, you can later find out that it's kind of like a facade, and he didn't really come to that. He's kind of a bit of a con man, but that's neither here nor there. Question 7. Which of the following quotes from the story demonstrate that the protagonist was a well-known figure in his community, right? So we need to look for something talking about his popularity, how he is so well-known around the community, right? That's the best way to kind of tackle these kind of questions. Again, you can't really look at the extract because the pieces of the extract are given to you, so we'll just walk through all the answer options. Now, A says, just why these inventions were a source of satisfaction to James Gatz of North Dakota isn't easy to say. Now, here it doesn't really talk about how he's so well known. It just kind of says, oh, his inventions were satisfying to James Gatz, right? He liked working on inventions, but it doesn't really talk about why he was so popular, right? B, Gatsby's notoriety spread about by the hundreds who had accepted his hospitality, right? Now, notoriety, good vocabulary word, you can write down, or if you didn't know, you could say it is the state of being famous, maybe for a bad reason or something, right? It's quite infamous in a sense, right? Or something bad, right? So that's the best part. That's the best option we have so far, right? Because it's talking about Jay Gatsby was quite notorious, and he was spread about the hundreds because of his hospitality, right? Or people who had accepted his hospitality. Now we'll keep looking at other answer options and see if there's anything better, right? Because sometimes there could be two answer options which are very suitable, but sometimes one may be just better than the other one, right? Now, see, the truth was that Jay Gatsby of West Egg, Long Island, sprang from his platonic conception of himself. Now, here, again, it does talk about Jay Gatsby and how he was known in a certain part of New York, but it doesn't really talk about how famous he is within the community, right? And then D, one persistent story that he didn't live in a house at all. This one is just talking about the rumors about him. We can kind of infer maybe this rumors are being spread because he is popular, but again, it's not the strongest. And right now, B is our best answer option because it literally says Gatsby was quite notorious, which will signal to us, oh, yes, this is the one that's talking about a well-known figure in the community. So that's all the questions for the first one, and we'll just move on to the next reading that we have here. Cool. So, like I said, the second extract or the second text usually is either a poem or it could be another narrative. It could be like quite an informative text, historical, anything of the sort. But here we have a poem, right? Not just any poem, we have a poem without rhyme. So we can say it's a free verse poem. And if you have taken a look at this, you'll see there's a very interesting thing going on with the repetition of the all around it, right? Which we'll tackle later on. But again, when it comes to poems, it's a very, very good thing to get in the habit of just writing a quick summary of what you think it's about. Here, a good summary you can write down is that it's about how the poet kind of appreciates life and all of its small details. Right? Yeah. So we'll just take a look at the questions and we'll talk about the text as we go through it. Question 8. It says, what does the persona regard as miracles, right? Now, if you look at it, the entire thing, the poem is obviously called Miracles, so it's about miracles, but not just any kind of miracles. It's talking about very, very ordinary miracles, right? It's talking about how when I stand under trees in the wood, right? Sit at a table at dinner with the rest, right? Animals feeding in the fields. It's not nothing like actually miraculous, but the poet is making the argument that every little like small minute thing, right, might be a miracle to somebody, right? That's somebody being him, because it says, to me, I know nothing else but miracles, right? So everything that the poet sees and kind of observes is a miracle to them, right? So if you look at our answer options here, it says A, objects and the interactions that are very ordinary but appreciated, right? So they are very, very ordinary, like standing on a tree, sitting at a table with dinner, animals feeding in the fields. They're all quite normal and regular, right? So you can say the best answer option here is actually going to be A. because they are very ordinary but appreciated, right? Because the person appreciating it is the poet, and the poet is trying to convince us to appreciate it as well. Now, 9. What is the poet's purpose behind the lines 22 and 23? So lines 22 and 23 are the lines over here. Now, these lines, it kind of just shows, it's talking about the fishes that swim, the rocks, the motion of the waves, the ships with the men in them, right? So it's talking about the sea, right? It's something about the sea, but obviously we kind of already know that because all the answers are talking about the sea. But what specifically about the sea? Before it's talking about the sea is a continual miracle, right? Now, if you look at, we'll just go through the answers and see which one is the best one that's kind of encapsulating the entire thing here. If you look at A, it says to highlight the sea is seemingly never ending. Now, you could get the sense because it's just listing a bunch of things, because there's the fish that swim, the rocks, the motion of the waves, the ships with the men in them. But if it was quite never ending, it would just like be a continual list, right? Right now, this might be a good answer, but we'll see if there's anything better. B, to explain that there were many miracles involved with the sea. That is a pretty good answer so far, right? Because it's listing all the miracles that are there, right? The fishes that swim, the rocks, the motion of the waves, the ships with the men in them, right? So those are all miracles to the poet, even though they might not be miracles to other people, right? And it's listing many different examples, right? So these are all examples of miracles, right? So we'll say B is our best answer option right now, but we'll keep looking at other ones. To show that seas invoke the most miracles out of any area of the world. Well, to have this as an answer option, there will be a need to have a comparison to other things, right? Maybe other areas, right? It may be talking about deserts or like fields, but it doesn't really say that. It just kind of mentions seas here, and it doesn't really compare it to anything else. So we can't come to the conclusion that it's a area with the most miracles. So we'll leave C as is. And then D, to demonstrate that only strange miracles always occur at the sea. Again, we can't come to the justification because there's no evidence. We just know that there are miracles at sea, but these are not the only strange miracles that happen in the world, right? There could be strange miracles elsewhere as well. So we can't say it's D. So again, our best answer option here is going to be B, because there are so many different examples of miracles, right? Many examples of miracles, and that is why 9 is going to be B. 10. What is the effect of starting many progressive lines with or, right? So this technique, right, as it might be obvious, it's called repetition, right? Just repeating the same thing at the very start of everything. It kind of, by having the repeated or again and again and again and again, our attention is drawn to it, right? It is very, very obvious, and we are kind of paying attention to whatever the poet says. It just keeps, it seems like a run-on sentence, right? Just like, or this, or this, or this, or this, right? It just keeps listing again and again and again, making it seem like there's so many different miracles out there, right? It's just never, never ending, right? So we know there's repetition. We know it's to kind of grab our attention. Right? And it's to kind of make it seem like it's a never ending list, right? So let's look at the answer option and see which one is kind of talking about maybe grabbing attention or making it seem like it's never ending, right? Now, A, it shows that often people can only observe one miracle at a time. That might not be the best answer. Like we said, the or getting repeated again and again make it seem like there's so many different ones, not just one miracle, but so many different miracles happening at the same time. B, it highlights the uncertainty of the persona inside of which things are miracles. Again, it doesn't really show that the poet is uncertain. If anything, it shows that the poet is quite enthusiastic about it, right? They keep going on like an excited child, right? C, it demonstrates the certainty of many interactions in life. Sure, there are many interactions, so this might be a good answer option so far. But we'll take a look at the last one and see if it's any better. Now, D, it emphasizes, right? So it grabs our attention, the endless list of simple everyday miracles, right? Which is true, because it's just like we said before, the continuous or like a run-on sentence makes it seem like an endless list. And the emphasis is obviously there because it keeps getting repeated. Anytime we see repetition, it's always to emphasize some kind of point that the poet is trying to make. And the message the poet is trying to make here is that miracles are there and we should appreciate them no matter how ordinary they seem to us, right? So obviously the best answer option here is going to be D. I'll just go to the next page now. 11. What meaning is most implied through the phrase, yet each distinct and in its place, right? So let's go back to our poem here. So that phrase is right here, right? Yet each distinct and in its place. So obviously it's referring to the miracles, right? That are always in its place, right? And it kind of seems natural there, right? Let's look at the answer option and see what we can work with. A says each individual miracle has its own unique purpose, right? Now that seems pretty true, right? Because here it's talking about distinct and in its place, right? Place meaning it has its purpose, right? Its distinctive purpose, you would say. And yeah, so that seems to be a very, very good answer option. We'll leave it as is and we'll walk through the other ones to see if there's anything better. Each miracle must be valued separately instead of being valued together. That might be true because it says each of them are distinct, but it doesn't really say they're better because they are distinct, right? We just know they are distinct. So B is probably not the best answer option there. C, miracles often have a collective purpose. Again, we can't say that because they're distinct, not collective, right? So we won't say C is the best answer option. D, there are many interactions which cause miracles to occur. Again, not really the best answer option because it doesn't really say that. It just says they're all quite unique, individual, and they're all in the place that it's supposed to be, right? And obviously, the only one that's kind of talking about that is A. They're all unique, right? They're in the place they're supposed to be, so A is our best answer option. Now, 12. Why does the persona use different units of measurement in the poem? So here, let's figure out where the different units of measurement are. If you look near the end, it's talking about every cubic inch of space, every square yard of the surface, right? So obviously those are two different units of measurement that are used around the world, right? Cubic inch is obviously used like in Australia here. Sorry, in America, right? Same with the yards, right? It's quite a American style of units of measurement, right? And it kind of shows, right? Go back to your answers here. It kind of shows, right? Like A says, it says to show people that from many different regions of the world believe in miracles, right? Many different regions of the world, different units of measurement, right? It's saying no matter what, wherever you are, there's going to be miracles, right? In the most mundane places, right? Whether it be in the cubic inches of your, what does it say? Cubic inches of a space or the square yard of the surface of the earth, right? Anywhere, any place, there could be miracles, right? So A seems to be our best answer right now, but we'll take a look at the other ones. B, to explain exactly where miracles may occur in the world. That's quite a literal interpretation of that by saying, oh, in this square yard, there's miracles. But it's not what the poem or the poet is trying to say, right? The poet is trying to say, no matter wherever you are, in what kind of unit of measurement used, there are always going to be miracles there, right? So B is not our best answer there. C, stress that many different areas of the world are miracles in themselves. That could be a possible answer because it's maybe saying like, some people use units of measurement here, the other people use units of measurement here, and they're quite miraculous in a sense. But again, not the best answer, but we'll keep that in consideration for now. And D, to raise concerns over how miracles are measured or recorded. Again, quite a literal interpretation. And when it comes to poems, we've got to be quite we've got to make sure we read between the lines and not take everything at face value, right? So D is not going to be our best answer option. Now, between A and C, I would say A is quite better of an answer option because if you go back to our summary that we gave by saying the poet is trying to make us appreciate life and all of its small details, A is kind of harping on the same thing because it's saying, oh, all these people in different areas of the world have miracles in the most mundane places. And again, that's why you should appreciate life and all of its small details, which is why 12 is most likely going to be A. Let's see. What is implied in the opening two lines of the poem? So let's take a look at the opening two lines of this poem. It says, why who makes much of a miracle? As for me, I know nothing else but miracle, right? It's pretty much saying, who really cares about miracles, right? Who cares? But for me, my world is nothing but miracles, right? I only know miracles, right? Kind of making, like, bringing apart this contrast, being like, a lot of people, the majority of the world doesn't really appreciate miracles. But to me, miracles are like my world, right? And I appreciate it so much, right? Which harks back to the main idea the poet is trying to make by saying, oh, we should appreciate miracles more as well. Now, if you go back to answer options here, it says the persona has trouble understanding other people's views. We know he has different views to other people, but he doesn't really talk about him having trouble understanding it, right? So probably not the best answer there. B, most people do not pay attention to the miracles around them. That is quite true, right? He's saying, oh, other people don't really care about the miracles going around them, but me, the poet, I care so much. So that's a pretty good answer. We'll leave that there. C, the persona had been unaware of miracles when he was younger. Doesn't really talk about when he was younger. He just talks about him appreciating it now. So not the best answer option there. D, most people have never witnessed a miracle before. Again, that's not what he's trying to say. He's saying like there are miracles, but people don't really care about them, right? He doesn't really say, oh, people have never seen miracles. Maybe they have, but they haven't realized it, right? So D, again, is not our best there. So we're going to say B is probably our best answer option here because it's saying, oh, people do not pay much attention, but he's trying to make the point that people should pay attention, which is why he goes on about all the different miracles that you may be able to observe in the world. We'll take a look at 14 here. What is the most likely reason why the author writes about this topic? So again, this is not one of those ones where you can kind of look at the poem and get an answer from. We just have to read between the lines and infer it by getting a good understanding of what this poem is trying to do and what it's about. Right? So we know it's about appreciating. It's about the poet trying to spread the message about appreciating life and all the small details. So knowing that, we'll try to go through the answer options and see if there's anything saying the same thing. A, to enhance the reader's skill in identifying miracles. Sure, that could be part of it, right? It could be like trying to say maybe people don't really know how to look at miracles, so that could be thing. That could be a likely reason, but we'll see if there's anything better. To increase the reader's appreciation of life, right? Now, this one is like spot on, right? We were talking about how the poem is trying to pretty much raise awareness about miracles and try to make people appreciate life more by seeing these miracles. So B here is a very, very good answer option, but we'll see if there's anything better, right? Obviously, B is better than A, which is why B is our best answer option right now, but we'll see. C, to raise awareness of the changing climate and its impact on the world. So raise awareness part here is true, but it's about the wrong topic here, right? It's not really about changing climate. It's about appreciating miracles, right? So that's not really the best answer option there. So we'll see if D is any better. To show his appreciation for his friends and family, it is to show his appreciation, not for friends and family, but more for miracles, right? And life in general, right? Friends and family is obviously part of that. It's a subsection of that, but it's not about the broader thing, right? The broader thing being life and the miracles that like occur in life, right? So C and D are very, very close. It's on the right track, but it's about the wrong things. A is on the right track, right? But B is the one that's going to be the best and the most likely reason, right? A could be a reason if there was nothing else, but B is our best answer option there, right? So we're going to go with B since it's kind of spot on with whatever it's trying to say. Cool. we'll move on to our next text here, which is the fill in the blank that we talked about before. Usually the text is always either a fill in the blank or a summary one where there's like 6 different texts and there's 7 answer options, and you kind of have to pick the answer option to the best summary kind of thing, right? Now, for this one is just kind of talking about ancient Egyptian mummies and the tattoos that archaeologists found on several different specimens, right? And what they mean for just general research and the historical significance of that, right? Now, when it comes to fill in the blanks, a couple of key techniques are you always got to look at the sentence before and after, right? So you got to look at sentence before and after. Before and after being like in the blanks, right? So if we were looking at 15 here, we would look at sentence before here and sentence after, right? We can usually glean a lot of different clues that will help us to figure out what the answer option is. A lot of them will boil down to just looking at 2 things, right? That we'll have to look for key words, right? Maybe words are being repeated or they're quite synonymous with other words, or key ideas, right? Maybe it's the same kind of idea that's kind of running through the entire paragraph, right? Because paragraphs, they usually focus on one central idea and it goes to the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing, right? So if you look at the paragraph, we can kind of see, oh, this paragraph is talking about an introduction, right? This one is talking about where it was found, and this one is talking about what on the tattoo, or what was on the specimens themselves, right? And what you could say maybe the last one is talking about the future repercussions of something, right? It usually boils down to that kind of stuff. Like the first one will be outlining what this entire thing is about, then maybe where it's found, blah blah blah, right? That will be a very good indication and a very good strategy of going about this fill in the blank question. So these 3 like strategies are the most important, and it's very important to keep this in mind as we move forward. Now, the first one here, right, is talking about they discovered ink on the mummified women, right? So we know there's mummies, there's ink on them, right? And after the sentence after, it's talking about the person suddenly seeing tattoos on a mummified person, right? So we know there's ink, and we know they suddenly saw tattoos on this mummified person. So knowing this, let's go to our answer options. If we look at answer option F, right, it's talking about they use infrared lights, which reveal things about the naked eye that they can't see, right? Now this one makes the most sense, right? Because we know there's ink of some sort, and we know they suddenly saw tattoos by doing something. What was that something that they did? They used infrared light, right, to reveal things that the naked eye couldn't see. So we know our best answer here, 15, is going to be F, right? Because of these reasons, right? We know there's suddenly tattoos and there's ink on the mummified women, right? So this is the strategy that we use. The strategy that we use here was just like the key idea, right? So we'll just write down key idea. The key idea being they saw something that they didn't see before. Now 16, pretty easy one here as well. Right before 16, so sentence before, we saw something called a site, right? So there's a place called this name, and they found the mummies there. So a location of some sort, right? So it's talking about location in this paragraph. Now, if we go to our answer options here, we know in E, right, it's talking about this ancient Egyptian city. So a location, right? And that gives us a big clue, because now we know 16 must be E, because this entire idea of the second paragraph is about where the mummies were found, and E is the only one talking about some kind of location, so we know 16 has to be E. We'll go back to 16 here, and we know this one is going to be E, because it's talking about locations here, right? Yeah, those 2 were pretty easy, but we'll go on to 17 now. Now here it gets a bit more harder, because 17 and 18, they're right next to each other, right? So we don't really have much to go off other than what we have before 17 and after 18, right? So before 17, it's talking about they had a tattoo on their neck, right? We know the tattoo was a symbol for protection. What does this mean, though, right? we got to ask ourselves, what does this mean, right? And by asking ourselves this, we can probably find the answer in the answer options, right? So we'll go to the answer options here. Now, if you look at the answer options, it says in B, this, right? This being the tattoo that they found on their neck, a symbol for protection, might suggest that the women may have been a religious figure, right? So usually when we come across like when it says like this or that or these, right? We've got to look at the sentence before and after and figure out what is this that they're referring to. And this being the symbol for protection, right? The symbol of protection might suggest that the woman might have been a religious figure of some sort, right? Austin said, Austin being the archaeologist that is an expert in this field, right? So knowing this, we can come to the conclusion that 17 here is going to be B, right? Was talking about the tattoos and what the significance of that tattoo was. Now, we said 17 and 18 were hard because right after 17 it's 18, right? So if you kind of didn't really know what was going on in 17, it would be hard to answer 18. Now in 18, if you go back to answer options, when you look at something, talk about tattoos, right? Because right after 18, it talked about 6 tattooed mummies as well, right? So we got to look for more things about tattoos, but maybe a broader conclusion that we can come to. We know the first one was symbol protection meant religious figure. So we'll see if there's something like a broader conclusion that we can come to. Now in 18, D, it shows these discoveries show that the tattoos, so key word here, right, may be linked with women's roles as healers or priestesses, right? So another broad conclusion. We know that symbol protection meant they were a religious figure, and going back more broadly, we know these discoveries show that tattoos may be linked with women's roles, right? And it gives examples like healers or priestesses, right? So we know that tattoos mean women had different roles in the society. And one example was of the religious figure, and more examples are of healers and priestesses, right? So if you go back, you can kind of tell that 18 is going to be B because the main theme here, right, for these 2 questions is the tattoos that they found on the bodies, right? So that is how we did those 2 questions there. Again, it's a key idea kind of thing, right? Key idea. Yeah. Cool. Now, 19. Right before 19, it's talking about 6 tattooed mummies. This one's kind of easy. It's talking about a quantity of mummies, right? And if you go back to answer options here, it says the first of these, right? The first of these was a female mummy, right? So the first of these 6 mummies was a female one, right? Found in 1891. So these here, like we said with the other one, are the 6 mummies that was talked about in the previous sentence. So again, we use our strategies, the sentence before, and we use a key idea, right? So we can come to the conclusion that 19 here is going to be G. Cool. Now here, 20. 20 is a kind of a harder question because there's no real clue that gives us any information about what 20 might be. Now, the strategy we're going to use here is a bit of a last resort kind of strategy, right? So we've answered the 5 questions that we have so far, right? We know it's not going to be F. We know it's not going to be E. It's not going to be B. It's not going to be D. It's not going to be G. And we're left with 2 answer options, right? So based on this, we have a 50-50, right? We know either 20 is going to be A or C. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put both of them and see if they make any sense given the context in that paragraph, right? So let's say 20 is going to be A. Let's say everything about the new tattoo discoveries is surprising, right? So let's go back. It says, everything about the new tattoo discoveries is surprising, says Carrie Milsenstein. He's an Egyptologist at Brigham Young University, right? It says researchers know little about this ancient Egyptian practice, right? What is this ancient Egyptian practice? It is the tattooing, right? Yeah. And it's quite surprising because they don't know such little things about it, right? So A seems to make a lot of sense here, right? Now, if you go back to answer C, let's say 20C now, right? It says tattoos vary greatly on the 7 Egyptian mummies. Now, it's talking about 7 Egyptian mummies. Before this, we know there were 6, right? So this, like, immediately we can tell, oh, there's discrepancy here, right? We know C doesn't really seem the best, and it's talking about how they vary greatly, right? You might think, oh, that could be true, but between A and C, we can kind of come to the conclusion that A is going to be a bit better because talking about how surprising the discoveries of tattoos are. We know the tattoos is the ancient Egyptian practice they're referring to, and we know they know such little things about it, which makes it seem so surprising because it's such unexplored territory, right? Right. So here, 20 is going to be A because of those reasons there, right? So that again was another strategy. Is actually the last strategy that you use if the first 3 don't work. It's just eliminating the other possibilities and seeing which one makes the most sense. So it's just process of elimination, right? We have 2 answer options. We just see if one of those 2 is better, and we just kind of get our answer from that, right? Because there's really not much to go off for the last one there. So we'll go to our last reading here. Now, like we mentioned, the last reading is always going to be the 4 extracts. They're always going to have some kind of common theme. The common theme for this one is a theme of kindness, right? And it'll kind of always be like anecdotes, some kind of informative thing. It could be a news report, usually non-fiction, could be fiction sometimes, a short story of some sort. But they all get linked from a common theme, right? Now, if you go through these answer options, it's very easy to find all the answers for this within the extracts themselves, right? So we'll have a go at doing this. The first one says here, explains why truly kind people also care about themselves, right? So we need to look for an extract, a part of an extract where it's talking about people caring about themselves, right? So that's the key part. Now, if you go to extract A here, the second and third line, it says, these people were able to be genuinely kind because they made sure to take care of themselves even as they gave, right? So they're taking care of themselves, right? And they're genuinely kind. So that's exactly what we're looking for, right? We're looking for people caring about themselves whilst being truly kind. So we can, based on that, we can say 21 is going to be A because of that, right? So this is the common technique that we use for these kind of extracts. We can always find the answer option within the extracts themselves, right? If we can't, usually we just infer it by just reading between the lines here. Now, we'll use the same technique for question 22 here. It says, talks about how being kind costs a person a lot of money. So here is a key phrase here, cost a person a lot of money. So when you look for something about money and costing a person money because they were being kind, okay? Now, if you go to answer option extract C here, we'll see this one is just mainly talking about, oh, this guy was trying to buy his friendship by from other people by kind of like by shouting drinks and dinner for other people, right? By just paying for them. And if you look at the near the end, it says, instead, I find myself out of pocket time and time again. And they somehow justified that it was okay, right? So they kind of take the advantage of him because of his kindness, right? They were getting free meals and free drinks and all that kind of stuff, right? With strangers that he barely knew, right? Because he was being so kind. So this one is our best answer here for question 22 because he was being very, very genuinely kind. And people taking advantage of that, which cost him a lot of money down the road, right? So if you go to 22 here, you can say the one that talks about being kind costs a person a lot of money is going to be C. Now, 23. Suggests that showing too much kindness can be a negative thing. Now, if you just remember what we talked about for extract C, it's talking about how his kindness was taken advantage of, right? People saw it as an easy opportunity to get a free meal, right? Strangers I barely knew, taking care of the cost of a meal or drink, right? And it wasn't reciprocated often, right? Meaning that he just kept doing it again and again, and nobody would repay it back, right? So this is the thing that it's talking about for question 23. This is how being too kind can be a negative thing, because it was negative for him because he wasn't making any real friendships, right? And obviously he lost a lot of money doing this practice again and again and again, right? He says near the end, it was my fault for trying to buy their friendship, right? It has often positioned me in a far worse way. So that's the key part there. He, by being too kind, right, he has been positioned worse than he was before his act of kindness, right? So we can say for question 23 here, based on what we have at the very last line, extract C, you can say the answer for question 23 is going to be C. Because such a negative thing by buying too much. Right? Cool. 24. Mentions how someone changed how they acted to try to be more kind, right? Now, again, we can find the answer in one of the extracts. If you look at extract A here, near the end, right? We look for something that's talking about how they acted. There's someone changed how they acted to be more kind, right? So they changed to be more kind. Okay, so two things that we look for. And at the end of extract A, it says, I made the decision to give up being nice and try to learn to be kind instead, right? So extract A, just a brief run through, is just talking about how some people don't really know what the concept of being kind is. They kind of muddle it up with the concept of being too nice, right? Being kind, like it says, is sometimes you have to disappoint people, right? You have to take care of yourself to truly be kind. Being nice might just be like, oh, doing stuff for people, but being truly kind is doing stuff for people and for yourself, right? It's kind of giving more nuanced take on what being kind is all about. And here, if you look at the last little line here, it says, I made the decision to give up being nice to try to learn to be kind instead. So we can kind of assume the person was nice before and they're trying to be more kind by changing the way they acted, right? So they changed how they acted to be more kind. So we know 24 is most likely going to be A, purely because of the last line there, right? It gives us away. It gives the answer away, essentially. Yep. Yeah. So by doing all these questions, we can kind of understand, like we can always find the answers within the extract, right? We just have to really pay attention to what's going on here. Now, question 25 gives an example of how someone was kind to a friend, right? So when you look for some example of a story or some sort of where somebody was very, very kind to a friend, if we go to extract B here, it's talking about how the good friend, right, was doing a very kind act by shaving their head because of the friend's battle of cancer, right? And to make them feel like he was not the only one without any hair. So a brief rundown of this extract, right, is this person who's in first grade, they're best friends, they love hanging out, but unfortunately one of them got diagnosed with leukemia. And his best friend, in solidarity for this terrible thing that was happening to his best friend, he shaved his head to try to raise more awareness, right? And to make him feel like his best friend was not the only one without any hair, as it says in the end here, right? So this is a very, very kind act, right? And this is the example we're looking for, right? It's an example of a friend being very, very kind to the other friend, right? So based on this, we can go back to answer 25, and we can say the answer 25 is going to be B, right? So it gives an example of how someone was very, very kind to a friend, and the act of kindness that was happening there was he shaved his head, essentially, right? 26 describes how kindness can be motivated by one's past personal experience, right? Now, if we go to extract D here now, right? So D, the one we haven't done so yet, a brief rundown of D. It's just about how this person had a very traumatic childhood. They worked their way through, and they opened up this cafe called Jesse's Jeans, right? And then apparently, a little bit of backstory about this cafe was that this person was enduring unsheltered homeless experience for more than 2 years, right? So it's talking about how they were motivated to open this cafe because he wanted to help fellow homeless people and the community at large, right? Because of his past experience of being an unsheltered homeless person as well for 2 years, right? So this is pretty much what the answer for 26 is, right? We're looking for something how kindness, right, can be motivated by one's past personal experience, their past personal experience being here, the unsheltered homeless experience, which is why the answer of question 26 is going to be D, because we know the best answer here is the one talking about how this person opened up a cafe to help homeless people because of his past experience with being homeless. Now, 27 explains the origins of someone's goal to create positive change in society, right? So again, this is very, very similar to question 26. And because it's so similar, we can kind of infer that this is also going to be extra D because we know, right, they had a goal of helping fellow homeless people and the community at large, right? They're trying to have a mission to bring forward positive change, right? So here, it literally has the phrase we're looking for, right, in their question. Because in the question, it quite literally says, they're trying to make a positive change in society, right? And the only one that's really talking about a positive change in society is extract D, where it says here, bring forth positive change. So again, quite an obvious one there. We can say question 27 is going to be extract D. Good. 28. Details why kindness doesn't always involve agreeing with somebody, right? So here, again, we got to look for something about how there's some kind of disagreements, right? And how that is kind of indicative of being kind, right? If you go to extract A here, it says, these people would often sometimes have to disappoint people by saying no, right? So obviously that's some kind of disagreement, right? We know there's an act of kindness, right? This is an act of kindness where we don't always agree with somebody, right? Yeah. And this is going to be our best answer option because it's literally referring to how you can be kind. And even then, by being kind, you don't always have to agree with something, right? It says you don't, sometimes people would have to disappoint other people by saying no. So we can say question 28 here is going to be A. And then 29, it says, describes how a kind act helps someone to feel less excluded. Now, if we remember what happened in extract B, over here, we have two first graders, right? One of them has leukemia. The other person is trying to raise awareness about this condition, right? And at the very end, right, it says, Zach did this entire thing by shaving his head because his friend was also bald at that time, right? He did this because he wanted to make his friend feel like he's not the only one without any hair, right? That he didn't feel excluded, right? Because obviously, if you don't have any hair, it's quite, it feels like you don't really belong because of the stigma surrounding, right? But in this case, his friend also kind of shaved his head in solidarity because, like it says in the abstract, he didn't want to feel like his friend was the only one without hair, right? So again, this is going to be a best answer option for 29, right? It's a kind act that this first grader did to help someone feel less included, right? By shaving their head because a friend had leukemia. And then 30 argues that kindness should be reciprocated, right? So key word here, reciprocated. Bit of vocabulary if you didn't know, reciprocate just means kind of exchange or give back just because somebody else did something. Kind of like payback essentially, right? In a good sense. It could be a good sense or it could be in a negative light as well. Now, if we go to extract C here, it's talking about, right? The entire point of extract C is how people took this person's kindness for granted and took advantage of it, right? And it was often not reciprocated here, as it says near the middle of extract C, right? And he kind of comes to this conclusion by doing this again and again and again, and he realizes, oh, people don't really want to be friends with me just because I'm buying stuff for them, right? It was his fault for trying to buy their friendship, right? And it obviously positioned him in a far worse way. Now, this one, right, question 30, it doesn't really explicitly say it in the extract, and we kind of have to infer it by reading between the lines, right? With this person kind of complains that it wasn't often reciprocated. So obviously we can kind of conclude that, oh, he's arguing that kind of should be reciprocated, right? Because it's not just about buying stuff and buying all these things for other people. It's more so about just like hanging out with people and like just having acts of kindness being reciprocated just so casually, right? So here, by through the process inference of reading between the lines, we can kind of say extract C is the one that's arguing that kindness should be reciprocated, right? Instead of just instead of just having it so that people just take advantage of your kindness just to hang out with you, right? Cool. So that is the end of all the extracts here. We'll take a look at the questions that we have in the chat. Cool. So we have question 1, 2, 4, 12, 24. We'll go back to question 1. Just as a side note, before we get started with the re-explanations, if you do like the style of content that we're dealing with today, we do have a couple programs coming up in the future. We have the January holiday program for just like last minute preparation before the selective. We also have enrollment for term 1 for the new year because there's going to be a couple of new spots opening up for all the classes. So if you do like the style of content, there are 2 options. If you're in year 5, you can obviously do SGC, which will mainly just be like practicing questions in a time environment, which is very, very, very useful, especially for selective, as selective is getting closer. And then if you just like this style of content where we go through each extract, just more detailed and all that, W&T is what we offer, which will go through like different readings and maths and thinking skills, all those topics. And this is more of the style that we'll have in those classes. So if you are interested, just feel free to reach out and grab some more information from that as well. But saying that, we'll go back to the re-explanations of these questions. So we have question 1 here. So question 1 says, how has the author portrayed the protagonist from the point of view of the reporter, right? So here it says, we'll just go through all the options. If you remember from this extract, this is about a person called Jay Gatsby, right? It's about Jay Gatsby's quest, right, to win his long lost love, right, by faking successful life, right? Just this extract specifically, right? It's mainly just talking about how what kind of reputation Jay Gatsby has, as well as what his backstory was, right? In terms of how did he grow up and how his name actually changed, right? Now, if you go to the question, it says, how's the author portrayed the protagonist, right, from the point of view of the reporter, right? So at the very start, it's talking about how there's an ambitious young reporter, right? He asked Gatsby if he had anything to say, right? Kind of implying that, oh, something has happened, right? Then after a bit, it says, there was a confused 5 minutes because nobody knew what was happening, right? And then it says, Gatsby has an ill reputation for whatever reason, right? Yeah. And there is rumors, right? Contemporary rumors, meaning there's rumors unfolding as they speak, right? About there's this thing that a persistent story, right? So we can kind of get the sense that this reporter is kind of painting, right, Gatsby out to be a very infamous person, right? Infamous meaning he's quite popular for the wrong reasons, right? because of some story that has happened, and the rumors being spread about it, right? Which is very, very indicative because of this little bit here, which is Gatsby's ill reputation, right? So he has a very poor reputation. Now, if you go to the answer options, the best answer option for all these four is going to be B, because he's quite mysterious. We don't really know what's happening, right? We know there's a confused 5 minutes because nobody knows what's happening. Why is he so seen in such ill light, right? Because of his widespread poor reputation, right? So here, the main idea here and the main key part that we need to understand is the part where Gatsby's ill reputation, which indicates that the answer is going to be B, because he has a popular poor reputation. Now, question 2. What was the protagonist's real name and why did you reject it? Right? Now, if we go to the extract here, it says his real name, right, was James Gatz, but at least legally his name, right? Jay Gatsby is just a name that he made up, right? And it says here, he had the name ready for a long time, right? And it's giving us clues because his parents were unsuccessful farm people, right? And his imagination had never really accepted them as his parents at all. So that's the key part there. He had never really accepted them as his parents, right? He didn't like the idea that his parents were unsuccessful farm people. And for that reason, he tried to make a new name, right? He said, oh, I'm not James Gatz anymore. I'm Jay Gatsby. I'm going to be Jay Gatsby, who's going to do so many things in his life, right? He's going to invent stuff. He's going to become a successful businessman, right? For whatever reason, he has aspirations, right? So if you go back to our answer options here, we know he has to be either between A and D, because we know his real name is actually James Gatz. But why was his name James Gatz? It's not because people disliked him because of his family history. He disliked his family history, right? He disliked his identity that he was born with, right? His identity being an unsuccessful person, right? Yeah. So that's why the best answer option between A and D is going to be D here, right? Cool. What the other ones? Cool. Question 4. So question 4 is a bit tricky, right? The best way to think about this one, it says the word beating means to be traveling. What does it also imply about the protagonist's life, right? So beating here, we kind of gave the sense of, oh, he's being like beat down on, right? He's getting beat down on by whatever thing, right? In this case, he's being beat down on by life and his daily activities, right? So we can kind of get this visceral sense that he's like really struggling, right? He's getting attacked essentially by whatever things that he has to endure in his life, right? So you can kind of say beating is him struggling for whatever reason, right? And if you go to the last little bit here, it says he had been beating his way along the South Shore, right, as a clam digger, salmon fisher, and any other capacity that brought him food and bed. But by reading between the lines here, we can kind of say he's struggling, right? He's not really doing well for himself, and he's really putting himself out there by doing all these manual labor jobs, right? He's really going through it for the sake of surviving, just getting through the next day, right? Any food, any shelter that he can get, just to make it to the next day, right? So if you go back to answer options, knowing all this, it says answer option A is will be him moving rapidly across the area. If a person is struggling like this, we can't really infer that he's going to be like really moving fast between the days. He's probably going to be moving quite slowly, right? Because he's really enduring a lot, right? A mental burden, right? Mental and physical burden that he has to endure, right? So you can write this down as well. He has a mental and physical burden, right? Did he remain in a small area over the year? Not really, right? Beating is kind of like we said, it's the burden that he has to endure, right? And then C, he travels slowly and with great difficulty, right? We know that's going to be our best answer option because of the little last bit here, the great difficulty. He has a lot of things he has to endure. just to make it to the next day. He has his mental and physical burden of doing these manual labor jobs like clam fishing, right? And salmon fishing, right? He's kind of just trudging along, right? He's just not really thinking about much other than just getting food and shelter, right? So he's trudging along. Cool. So that's the answer for question 4 there. What else do we have? Question 12. So we'll go to question 12 here. Now, question 12 says, why does the persona use different units of measurement in the poem, right? So to answer this question, let's obviously figure out what the units of measurement are. The units of measurement here, it's just near the end where it's talking about cubic inch of space, the square yard of the surface, the foot of the interior swarms, right? Is there anything else? Let's see. No. So those are the only units of measurement, right? It's talking about all these different units of measurement. It's the inch, the yard, the foot, right? To show that no matter what, right? No matter where you are, what kind of unit of measurement that you use, you're kind of always going to see miracles, right? You're not exclusive to it just because you live in a certain different part of the world, right? So that's the kind of conclusion that kind of reached to, right? So you write this down. The different units of measurement that we have is the part where it's with the inch, the yard, and the foot, right? Cool. So we'll take a look at the answers and see which one makes the most sense, knowing all this. A says to show that people from many different regions of the world believe in miracles, right? Yeah, so here we know it's going to be answer option C, because A is talking about different regions of the world, but it's not just showing us that people from different areas of the world believe in miracles. It's more so showing how that different parts of the world are the miracles, right? It's referring to this cubic inch is a miracle, this yard is a miracle, this foot is a miracle, right? So that's why it's actually going to be C, because it's kind of by repeating this miracle thing, this measurement thing again and again, we're kind of emphasizing it, right? We're stressing this, right? So kind of similar to the repetition of or. When at any time we repeat stuff, it's always to emphasize it. Right here. Repetition is all about emphasizing. Yeah. Cool. So that's just a little bit about question 12 there. If you look at the answer options for question 12, the other options for question 12, we know that answer option D says to raise concerns over how miracles are measured or recorded. Like we said, that's quite a literal interpretation, which is not what we're trying to do. We need to have some kind of figurative or reading between the lines kind of approach when we come to poems, right? Reading between the lines. Yeah. So answer option D and answer option B, right, are very literal interpretations. A and C are probably the best two here. And between A and C, A is just talking about different people from different parts of the world believe in miracles, whereas C is talking about actually the areas in the different parts of the world are the miracles themselves, which makes the most sense, right? Because it's talking about this cubic inch, right? This cubic inch of space is a miracle. The square yard of the surface is a miracle. The foot of the interior swarms is a miracle, right? So it's talking about the spaces themselves, not actually the people who live there, right? So, which is why 12 is going to be C. And now if you go to answer, question 24. Question 24 says, mentions how someone changed how they acted to try to be more kind, right? So when you look for someone changing how they acted, right? So someone changing how they acted to be more kind, right? And if you look at answer extract A, sorry, extract A, like we said, is talking about the difference between being nice and kind, right? And if you look at the very end of extract A, it says, I made the decision to give up being nice, right? So they're not nice anymore. They've changed to try to learn to be kind instead, right? So they're trying to change themselves, right, to be more kind, which is why the best answer option there for 24 is going to be A. Cool. So those are all the re-explanations that we have right now. If there's any issues or if you have any other questions, just know that this is recorded and will be sent out to the challenge group. And if you need any further re-explanations or anything, you can feel free to just listen to the recording again and see if there's any thing that you missed to kind of make sure you completely understand the questions here. But yeah, cool. Just to rehash everything that we've gone through so far. The strategies that we use. For the first one, we have a narrative, right? When it comes to narratives, the best thing to do, write a little summary, like a sentence also, just to really show that you comprehended what the text is about. Look for key parts. You can usually find the answers within the extract itself. If not, read between the lines, right? Very, very important to do that for narratives as well as poems. When it comes to poems, identify if there's any poetic techniques like a repetition that we have here, and try to write a little summary about what the poem is about as well, right? So very important stuff. Poems are usually the hardest extract they will get. So it's very important that you know how to tackle it, right? It's very tricky sometimes because it's quite, you can't really take it at face value. You have to have a not so literal interpretation about what's going on. You kind of take a step back and see, oh, what is the poet trying to say about through this poem, right? So the message they're trying to send. And with fill in the blanks, there's three key strategies. The first one being you have to look at the sentence before and after. Second one being you have to find key words, maybe words that are being repeated or words that are synonymous with each other. And three, which is key ideas, right? Maybe an idea that's being repeated within the paragraph, like the tattoos for this one, or where they were found, and so on and so forth, right? So those are the key strategies. And the last resort strategy that we dealt with for this one is when we have two answer options left. We have one question, and we just see between those two answer options which one is a better one. And then we have the last four extracts. And with this, like we said, we can always usually find the answers within the extracts themselves. Like we did with this one. The only one that we couldn't really find within the extract itself was the last one. And we had to do a bit of reading between the lines and inferring, right? So those are the key strategies that we have for each of these extracts. They're all very different and unique in its own sense, but if you know how to tackle them, they should be pretty self-explanatory. In terms of difficulty, the poems are usually the hardest, followed by the narratives and the fill-in-the-blanks, and the extracts at the near the end are usually the most easiest tackle since the answers are kind of hidden within the extracts. You just have to kind of look for them. With the reading itself, a lot of people don't really like to annotate. My tips for these kind of questions, try to write as much as you can. Even when I do the questions, it's very, very useful to just circle the stuff, any keywords, underline anything that you might see might be important, annotate by writing down the